All right, so we're going to be looking at multicellularity, something you won't fully understand for a bit, but it should be a little bit of an introduction into it. On the most basic of levels, okay, cells make tissues, tissues make organs. So a muscle tissue is made of muscle cells. Nerve tissues are made of nerve cells. And those tissues can combine to make an organ, okay? So for us, maybe like a heart, you have blood tissue in your heart, you have muscle tissue, you have connective tissue, a bunch of different types of tissues, all of made of a different cells to make up an organ. Here they're giving you some examples with the vascular tissue, the root tissue, right? Stem and leaves. These are all different types of tissues that exist in different organisms. And then it's giving you systems, organ systems, groups of organs that work together. With us, it would be like the digestive system or the cardiovascular system, stuff like that. Here, this is kind of neat. This is skin cells. And skin cells are actually made up of dead skins. Dead skin. So if you ever wondered what a human zombie would look like, just look at the person next to you, because all you see on them is dead skin. Like the live skin that you would see is the pink, bloody, kind of sensitive, really, really, really pink, raw-looking skin, right? But the skin that we see every day is dead skin cells. This is bone, and as you can see, bone is very hollow. Otherwise, we would never be able to move. And then intestines, which is increases the surface area to be able to absorb nutrients. So a cell becomes one type of cell or another. When a cell is created, it starts off as a stem cell. It is undifferentiated. It could be any kind of cell it wants to be. And then through a process that's not entirely understood, a cell differentiates and becomes something specific. And this is an important process because you don't want toenails growing out of your eyeballs. You don't want, a hand living in your brain. So you want to make sure that your hands are where your hands are supposed to be and your brain's where your brain's supposed to be. And there are some situations where it's not quite right. But stem cells, undifferentiated cells, could be controlled to do some pretty amazing things. So, for example, they can divide and renew themselves and stay undifferentiated until they're forced to differentiate and become a specific type of thing. So they can be stored almost indefinitely, and you can make lots and lots of copies of them. And then once a stem cell differentiates, it can become a specialized cell and a new stem cell or two new stem cells. Now, the problem, the issue, the concern a lot of people have with stem cells is where you can actually, where you find these cells. These cells are literally found, many of them, in embryonic cells, in an embryo. And you can only get them, at least these, which we'll talk about here, you can only get them from abortions and from things like that. So this is where the massive amount of pushback to this sort of technology comes from. But first, let's describe some of these stem cells. So totipotent can grow into any other cell type. A pluripotent can grow into anything except for a totipotent. And a multipotent can grow into cells that are closely related to the cell that they are. So multipotent you can get from adults. A pluripotent you get from embryos, which is usually you have to get it from the aborted fetus. And a totipotent is very difficult to get anywhere unless you fertilize the egg and then do it yourself. So it is extraordinarily complicated and difficult and, at best, controversial form of science. That's not to say that there isn't a lot of things that can come from it. So, for example, the ones that come from adults and embryos, you can grow them, isolate them and grow them to make red blood cells, neurons, muscle tissues. which can be important, especially the ones that come from adult cells. There's not a lot of people who are, and rightly so, there's not a lot of pushback from that. There are, as it says, ethical issues. That's a very gentle way of putting it. But you can grow pluripotent embryonic cells in a lab and grow them safely in culture and get many, many, many of them. And the idea is, can they be used to treat leukemia and lymphoma? This is cancer of the lymph nodes, which is a vessels next to your blood vessels that are involved in your immune system and also involved when you get bruises and fluid that gets out of your blood system. And leukemia, which is your bone cells. So this is bone cancer. Now, this is not to say that stem cells, definitely can be used. It's more like can this work? Would this be useful? Is this worth it? Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Would it be worth doing pluripotent stem cells in order to treat leukemia and lymphoma? Do they make that much of a difference? All right, so they can also be used to cure disease and replace damaged cells, and they can revolutionize the drug process. The dark side of this would be what's stopping a rich person from forcing someone, or not forcing them, but grabbing someone who's poor, paying them $10,000 to give them some stem cells so he can walk again. Or maybe his liver's damaged and he needs some stem cells, so he pays someone to carry his embryo for 3 months to abort it, and then takes them from a place that $10,000 would pay for their whole village, and now they've just exploited women, human trafficked, and used stem cells to benefit themselves. So it's a, I don't want to say it's a slippery slope, because we'd be there as soon as you would allow it. But this is why stem cells are ethically perilous. And that's it for Chapter 5.